Welcome everyone. My name is Chintan Patel, a Microsoft Office 2019 and 365 Specialist Expert Instructor from Benoni, South Africa, and I'll be your instructor for this event titled Microsoft Excel MO-200 Exam Prep on the 27th of July 2020. And we continue with our exam prep series where we're looking at all the content we need to know to prepare ourselves for the MO-200 Excel exam so we can ultimately achieve the Microsoft Excel Associate certification. I've been going through these sessions every week and trying to assist you in understanding how we need to tackle Excel and how do we tackle the content that we are tested on. So it just makes it easier for you when you are practicing at your own pace, when you then approach the exam. How do we deal with some of the questions? These are my social media handles. I post content on here on a regular basis. LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. If you'd like to contact me privately, I'm available on Telegram. My YouTube channel link is also available, and my website. If you haven't seen the lessons, the previous lessons, check out the videos on my YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to my channel too. This lesson will also be up on my YouTube channel. These are my achievements, the certifications I have achieved, and technically this is what we are aiming to get as well. Maybe if not all of them at the same time, but starting with the Excel Office Specialist certification and the badge at the top that you see. This is where we actually want to get to after going through all these videos and attempting the exam. So I'll be doing a special video, a webinar on how do we actually achieve these certifications. And I'll come to that specific discussion in a moment, what are we talking about. But I teach the Microsoft Office Specialist programs for Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Access, and ultimately we want to get these certifications so it becomes something that we can show as proof that we know the Office applications really well. We maybe want to also achieve the Office Specialist Associate and Office Specialist Expert certifications to show true mastery over the Office applications. I also teach Excel VBA, Power BI for end users, SharePoint for end users, and Microsoft Teams for end users. Remember, we are using Microsoft Teams for this session, so please familiarize yourself with the environment. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. You can even unmute your microphone and you can speak up. During the meeting, please do keep your microphone off unless you'd like to say something to minimize the disturbances around us. And as I was saying, that I am going to be conducting my very first international webinar, and I'd like you to attend. This is something which I'll be talking about quite in detail, the Microsoft Office Specialist certifications overview. I'll be doing this alongside Microsoft MVP, or Most Valuable Professional, Vlad Katrinescu, and we'll be talking about everything an end user or business user needs to know to achieve the Microsoft certifications. If you're a trainer that is aspiring to become a Microsoft Office Specialist Instructor like myself, and then ultimately becoming a Microsoft Certified Trainer through these certifications, this is also for you. I do recommend that you join the session so you can hear about my experiences and what we need to know to ultimately become a Microsoft Office Specialist Trainer, getting the certifications, what was required to get there. So please do attend. I'll be posting up the link on my YouTube channel. I will be making sure that it's also available on social media. It is currently on all of my social media channels, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and I'll be sharing this link once again after this particular course in the YouTube video. right? So please do ensure that you attend. This is this is a very special event, and not a lot of events focus on the Microsoft Office Specialist program. This is something you really do not want to be missing out. Okay, so we want to also just make sure that we are looking at the exam objectives quite frequently. I say this in all of my lessons, that whenever we are preparing for an exam, for a Microsoft certification, it can be actually any certification for that matter, you will find a list of objectives or the skills that are going to be measured in the exam. You should actually be looking at this very frequently to remind yourself what you need to be studying for the exam, so you can focus on the relevant content and not waste time on trying to learn everything. So we've been following these particular objectives in the videos or the sessions I have been teaching, and we'll be finishing off certain sections today. We might even start some new ones if time permits. I also will be sharing the links on how to get to these particular pages or to these objectives. So we also want to be looking at that particular page, the Microsoft Excel MO-200 landing page, where we will find the objectives for this particular exam, for this particular certification. This is just my YouTube channel, so this is where all of the previous videos have been posted. So please do go have a look at them if you haven't looked at them already. I work through exercise files. These are publicly accessible exercise files. Again, the links will be shared. So please do download them if you want to work through the examples whilst I am explaining in the video, or you're just welcome to watch whatever I'm doing on the screen. Let me get started on what we are actually going to be covering. So I am working in a folder called Manage Tables and Table Data from the exercise files. I'm working with an Excel workbook called Company Report. And in this particular Company Report workbook, I have the All Product Sales Report worksheet. Now, I usually go through what I have covered in the previous sessions. So I just briefly will mention what I covered in the last session. I covered everything to do with Format Painter, the copy and paste function for formatting. If you want to copy and paste any form of formatting, whether that's color, currency formatting, styles, borders and shading from one source to a destination, then we use the Format Painter for that. I looked at the cell styles area, where we were able to use some of Excel's recommendations on formatting certain cells based on the content we have present inside the cells. So if we went to our Home tab and we went to our styles group, we have cell styles available. These are some of the styles we were actually making use of. Before I continue, let me just change the settings for the theme. Maybe it's not really visible. Great. So we were looking at the Home tab, the styles group. Under cell styles, we saw different types of cell styles for different types of data that you may have inside your spreadsheet. So if you have cells that represent a calculation, you may want to format that cell as a calculation, something as input values, or values that will work in a formula with the input cell style. We looked at all the different heading styles and what each heading style serves, what purpose does it serve inside a worksheet or a workbook. So please do have a look at the previous video. I went into great detail on what each of these heading styles actually mean and how should we actually be using them, right? They're not just there for the sake of being there. They have a very specific purpose. If you use them correctly, then the correct message is put across to the audience or to the reader on what you're trying to convey. We also very briefly looked at the clear formatting command here, where in just one go, I'm able to remove all the different types of formatting I've applied on ranges of cells. So it is a better option rather than trying to go through many undo steps to actually get to a specific point back to where you began. So you select the data, home tab, editing group. I always refer to this as the pink eraser or the purple eraser, depending on the version of your Excel that you're using, and that will remove your formatting in one go. We also looked at defined names and referencing defined names. That took quite a bit of time. It was quite a detailed section where I went through all the different methods of giving a range of cells a specific label. So it's easier to navigate to that particular range. It's easier to use in calculations to actually make cells more meaningful. I used the name box method. I used the define name method in the formulas tab, define names group. I also used create from selection method in the formulas tab, define names group. We looked at the name manager, a summary of all the different names available inside our spreadsheet or the workbook. We also looked at the use in formula command to make use of the names inside our formulas, inside our functions. So I spent quite a lot of time on the define name section. Please do go have a look at the video. You do want to actually try and use some of these. They're very, very useful. We then looked at Sparklines, which is an alternative charting tool that we may want to use. And this allowed us to insert a chart inside a very specific cell. So we saw that we were able to insert a sparkline inside a cell. And what did the sparkline really show us? It really allowed us to show the performance over a specific time period for different products, maybe for different types of data. So if you have something that you'd like to show, compare multiple items in a spreadsheet against a time period, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, quarters, then you may want to use a sparkline for that instead of trying to illustrate that on a chart. So we went through on how do we actually create sparklines. We ended off by looking at conditional formatting in our home tab styles group, where we are able to apply meaningful colors, meaningful formatting on our data to show performance, to show some decision making, right? It's one of the simplest ways to actually give some insight, or to get some insight rather, from your data, to make those useful decisions that will help you help your company to succeed in the line of work that you're currently in, to help your teammates out. It just really is a good way to make decisions on certain types of rules we have present, certain statistics that we can really calculate, and certain relative reporting that we can see from the data. So do go have a look at the videos I have explained in great detail. Today, we start off with creating tables from cell ranges, seeing all the related settings and features around tables. We'll also see with tables the ability to filter and sort data, including using table references in functions and formulas. If we do have time, we will go on to the next domain, where we will be looking at performing operations by using formulas and functions. And then as we get to that section, I'll talk more about what we're going to be doing there. So it's starting off with the table object. So what is the table object? A table is a type of report that you can insert into your spreadsheet that gives you greater functionality when trying to make sense of the data. So far, we've been working through our data, doing calculations manually, doing certain formatting manually. We were putting in data in various ways, we're going to see a whole new level of automation when we are creating a table. And you may even notice that since you will see how the table actually functions, you may even want to stay in the table view instead of going back to what you are currently working with. It is a very enhanced view. You can do a lot of things when you're inside a table view, and it's really then just a preference. Do you want to stay in the table, or do you want to actually go back to whatever you're working with? It really automates certain things that we've been doing so far on a much higher level. And so what we want to do, we want to insert a table object onto this raw data over here. So we want to do some calculations. We want to make sense of this particular data. We want to put in some formatting. So the table object is a possibility that we can use with this data. We also want to do certain levels of sorting, certain levels of filtering to help us understand certain performance of how certain products actually did well. Did they do well? Did they do badly? And we just want to get some statistics out as well. So to insert a table, you would click anywhere inside your data set. So it's important that we click inside the data set and not outside. Clicking anywhere inside, we can, if we want to, on our keyboard, push Control A to select all the data. Right? That will select everything within the boundary of the data. It is not necessary though, because when you insert a table, it will do that automatically for you. But then once you have selected somewhere inside the data set, you'll go to the Insert tab. In the Tables group, you'll find this command called Table. Control T is also a command you may want to use. So if I push Control T on my keyboard, it will select all the data that I have in front of me. You can see here that it's selecting A4 to F581. That's where my data exists. We do have a box that has been checked or ticked that says my table has headers, which is important because those headers will be representing the data that we have. If we don't tick the box, then the labels become part of the data, and that really doesn't work well when we need to do certain calculations. So all we do is we push OK. What we will see, our table has been created, the data has been transformed. We will see, first of all, that we have color. We have this blue and white shading that has been put in. We have this great level of formatting, it really makes the headings stand out. We have arrows which are now displayed next to some of the all of the headings here. We'll go through these arrows in a moment. We have a new contextual tab available to us called Table Design, where we can see everything that we need to do with this table, trying to make sense of it, trying to really make this table stand out. When we scroll down this particular table, we will see that our column headers are also frozen for us. So I don't need to worry about which record I'm on and which particular location I am looking at when I'm scrolling down. I'll be able to see very clearly which column I'm looking at when I am working with a table object. So the table has been inserted. Great. Now what can I do with this? So we're going to look at this really from left to right for this particular table object. The first thing you can do here is to give your table a name. This is very similar to defining a name that we looked at in the previous session. We may want to give our table a name because when we are creating reports or pivot tables or anything that you'd like to use for further insights or further reporting or even further calculations, giving the table a name is very useful. It just gives more meaning to your table. You understand what you are using. So we can actually click inside this text box over here, and we can give this particular table a name. We can call it something like Contoso. CONTOSO. We want to probably make use of an underscore if we want to put more than one word. We do follow the same rules as defined names. No space is allowed. So replace the space with an underscore. Shift and the dash key gets you your underscore. So Contoso underscore sales would probably be something that would add meaning to this table. And we can push enter and our name gets defined. And how do I know this actually worked? Well, first of all, you can click outside the table object. When you click outside the table object, you have unselected or deselected the table. You will see that the table contextual tab has disappeared. When you click back inside, you will find the table design, the contextual tab is available. You'll also see then the Contoso sales name is appearing. Okay, so if you'd like to do anything with the table, any adjustments and settings, you want to enable certain features, you have to click in the table. Please do not be outside of the table trying to figure out how to make changes to the table. You need to click inside and you'll see everything that you need to do with table designs. Table design, the particular contextual tab, we can do everything that we need to do with this particular table in this tab. So we've renamed the table. What do we have next? I'll come back to this tools group over here. We have the table style options group over here where I can enable or disable the header row if I want to switch it on and switch it off. I can enable formatting, special formatting for the first column. I can enable special formatting for the last column. I can switch on banded rows or banded columns. This adds an alternative shade of color on every alternative row or every alternative column, right? So the term banded is used over here in the exam. They may not use the term banded. They may use a synonym for the word banded. So just remember that banded is something every alternative row. If you need to switch that on or switch that off, this is the setting to go to. We may want to apply a specific table style. So if we go to and open this gallery of more table styles, we will see a variety of table styles that we can choose, right? In the exam, they may ask you to apply a very specific table style, which will have a certain accent, a certain shading, a certain weight of colors, and what you just need to really mouse over these table styles, and it will tell you the name that you need to apply if asked in the exam. So there are many different shades of colors available, really certain ones that contrast really well. You can even create your own table style, which I briefly mentioned in the previous video. If you need to meet a certain corporate identity, you need to use company colors, you need to use colors for specific colors for a specific reason, then you may want to create your own table style, which you are then presented with the view. Again, maybe I'll just briefly show it, where you can choose which parts of the table you'd like to format. You can give it a name as well, this particular style. And when you choose this format button, you are then presented with font, border, and fill, where you can choose the colors you like. You can pick your own colors from this color wheel. You can even go to custom colors and pick something out of this range over here. You can specify RGB values. So you have quite a lot of customization when it comes to creating your own colors, trying to match your corporate identity. And I do look at more of this. As I mentioned in the previous session, I look at everything to do with colors in my PowerPoint preparation series. As a PowerPoint exam, I'll be doing a session on that, or many sessions on PowerPoint to prepare ourselves for the PowerPoint exam, because that's where we look in greater detail, where we are formatting objects and text to, and really working with certain colors. So you choose a particular style from here. I'm just going to pick a very another one that I like over here. So a table style has been applied, right? So what else can we do here? The one box that I didn't mention is the total row. This box that you can tick called the total row. When you tick or check the total row box, it gives you a row, or it inserts a row at the bottom of your data set. And the purpose of this total row is to get really quick summaries of the data in the columns above. So you can see that this total has been calculated for quantities sold. So it's using a function called subtotal. We look at subtotal in other topics, and I think it's in the next exam as well. But we are just really seeing here very quickly that Excel is able to calculate the sum of the values in the quantity sold column and give me the total amount over here. And if I want to see a different calculation being done, I can go to this drop-down arrow next to the amount, and you will see a list of functions readily available for me to use. So it's as easy as just choosing one of these functions to see the calculation for that particular column. Maybe I want to see how many records I have inside this particular set of data. So if I choose count, it will tell me that I have 577 records over here. I even maybe want to see the maximum. What is the maximum quantity sold? What is the minimum quantity sold? We saw some already. We can even choose standard deviation. We can choose variance. So very quickly, we can get these summary calculations, these statistics done. So for unit price, I may want to see what is the average price from the data that I have over here. And so you pick for the columns depending on the type of data that you have. I chose that I want to look at quantity sold. I want to the sum of the quantities sold. I want to see the average price. So in the exam, you may be asked to calculate a particular answer for a certain column in a table. You have to then switch on the total row, get the solutions from here. At no point will you be editing this formula or function manually, right? You don't need to do that. It's as really easy by going to switch on the total row, go to the drop down, choose what you want to apply, and that's it. Okay, it's as easy as that. When you are done with your reporting, when you are done analyzing your data using these statistical functions, we can even switch off the total row. If you want to bring it back, we switch it on again. Right, so it's very easy to switch on and off. We don't need to delete things. We don't need to find ways to hide it. It's really available at the top in table style options. What we also want to do here is we want to add data. Let's say you get more data inside this particular data set. You get updated data. You get a brand new set of data that you'd like to insert. And Excel really does wonders when you add data inside over here. It really picks up the data really well, and it does formatting for you. It does autofill for you as well. So that green square at the bottom right-hand corner, where we are usually using it to fill the data down, that gets done for us quite automatically. So let's actually give that a try here. Inside cell G4, I want to type in total sales because I want to calculate the total sales with the unit price and the quantity sold to see actually how well did these products do. As soon as we type in total sales in cell G4, we can see that it auto formats that column. It formats the heading, puts an arrow next to that particular column header. So that happens quite easily for me. Now I want to do this calculation. So total sales is unit price times quantity sold. We can start off by pushing equals. When we are using a table, we want to physically click on the cell that we'd like to use instead of the alphabet letters and row numbers. And what you will see here is that defined names happen automatically too. All the defined names for all the columns get created for you. You don't need to define them. You don't need to use cell references. We see here that unit price has been used as soon as I click on one unit price amount. So what is this doing here? This is the notation that tables use when we are trying to reference an entire column for a certain calculation. So you wouldn't, again, need to type this out. You don't need to type out open square brackets, the @ symbol, and open square brackets again, and unit price, and close it off. You may make a mistake. So you rather want to select the data, and this happens automatically. You then push the multiplication symbol on your keyboard, the star key, and then you push cell F5 where we have quantity sold. So unit price times quantity sold will give us total sales. All we do over here is we push enter, and you can see how awesome this is, that it really fills the data for you all the way down. This is all because you have a table object inserted. Without a table, you can't do this. It will not complete this for you automatically. Without the table, it will not put defined names for you automatically. Without the table, it will not auto-format this particular column for you. Okay, so you really want to be making use of a table object for reporting, even if you want to use it on a regular basis just for setting up your data. It works really well when you have existing data. So you can't really create a table from scratch. It really needs some data first to see. So you can probably start off with certain cells and then insert the table. And then as you add more and more cells or more rows or more columns, it will start auto formatting for you. And what we may want to do is we probably just want to make some of these columns auto fit so we can see the data much more clearly inside these columns here. So this has been formatted for you as well. You can see that total sales, the column header is frozen for us, so we don't need to worry about where we are looking at. We can go to table design, we can switch on the total row. We can now do a calculation for this particular column. Maybe I want to see the average sales for this particular column. Maybe you want to also see the maximum inside this column. You want to see the minimum. You want to see even total sales for everything put together. That's quite a large amount that we have over there. Okay, so that is a really quick way to insert a column to get data inside. Even if we were to add a new row over here, so let's say I will switch off my total row. I want to put in another entry over here. So let's try to put, say, 01 August 2016. Right, you can see automatically that a new banded row has been put in for us. We just have to fill in all the necessary details, and it just all the calculations will happen automatically as I fill out these cells here. I'm just going to undo that because I don't have any data for this here. So back inside the table object, back to table design. From here, what else can you do? You can also resize the table. And resize the table is really a shortcut to include more rows inside your table. So let's say that you have a situation where you created a table for some existing data, and then you have some new data that you've inserted, and you'd like the existing table to pick up the data from the new data that you have. So you'd go to resize table, and you will then just edit the cell references that are displayed in this particular dialog box. You can even remove this particular text and reselect the data as you like, and that will resize the table. That will include more data. It can even exclude some data, right? And it says here, note the headers must remain in the same row, and the resulting table range must overlap the original table range. Okay, so please do take note of that, and then you just push OK, and your new data gets included with this existing table. We also have the ability to insert a slicer. So a slicer is a means to filter the data visually. So I'll come to insert slicer in a moment. Let me show you first how do we filter without using a slicer, and then maybe I'll show, then we'll see how the slicer works, and then you can choose what you'd like to use. So we have these arrows next to these headings here. These arrows here allow us to do some very quick sorting and very quick filtering. What does sorting mean? We want to organize the data so it's easier to read, easier to understand, even probably make some decisions from the data we have. So let's say for quantities sold, I want to see the smallest quantity first and then the largest quantity last. So I can go to the arrow next to cell F4, choose sort smallest to largest, and then I can see the smallest quantity sold quite instantly. I can choose to go in reverse, largest to smallest, see the highest quantity sold, and then the lowest will be at the bottom. With each of these drop downs, you will see different wording for different types of data you may have. So if you have dates in a certain column, you will see the words oldest to newest and newest to oldest. You won't see smallest to largest. You will then see your product key, smallest to largest. For manufacturer, you'll see sort A to Z and Z to A because we have text. The same applies over here. You may even find in certain columns, depending on the data you have, it will say sort ascending and sort descending. So do familiarize yourselves with these words because depending on the type of data you have, you may be required to sort certain data. And then if you're trying to look for ascending, descending, smallest to largest, it may not be there. You need to then just really make sure you understand how to match the correct words to the correct type of data that we have. So I can sort in various ways that I have here. Oldest to newest to oldest, that would be for date-related data. We also then have the capability of filtering. So filtering allows us to see very specific data inside our spreadsheet. So I want to see very specific performance on certain types of or certain records that I have here. So the functionality that you have available here when you go to the drop down is the ability to untick or uncheck a box or check or tick a box. So you would typically select all if you want to see now something very specific. So maybe I want to see the 16 gigabyte MP5 player M1600 black. Then I want to see the next product here. I want to see the next product here. And I just tick the box or check the box and push OK. And I'll see very specific information. So if I want to see the comparison between these, then it just makes it easier to see it when I have filtered the data rather than trying to scroll to see that specific information. Just note with filtering, we're not deleting records, we're temporarily hiding them. You'll see that the records in the row headers here have been hidden. We don't see the numbers there. And if we do want to bring the data back, all we can do is go back to this drop down arrow. We will look for this funnel with a cross that says clear filter, and it brings back our original data. We can choose to tick boxes. You may be required to pick something from the list here. This is a very long list, so trying to look for it can take some time. You do have some search functionality to find something specific. So if I type out wireless, then I can get everything that has the word wireless inside. And then I can unselect whatever the results I have got here. I can choose to pick a couple of options. I can push OK, and it will then show me a comparison between the different items. I can make decisions based on the results that I see here. When I'm done, I can choose clear filter from product name. So filtering is available using this area at the bottom. We can even apply text filters. So maybe you want to just as an example, you want to apply a text filter on the data which probably has the word DVD inside. Right, so because we have so many products here that possibly have the word DVD inside, I don't want to be ticking boxes to find all of the DVD related products. So I can use something called a text filter, which will allow Excel to filter based on a criteria that I specify. So I want to choose text filter equals. And so we want to show the rows where product name equals what. You type in what you're looking for, DVD, and we can push OK. So you'll see that it doesn't actually give you the results you're looking for, because you need to be very specific inside your search area. So if we choose equals, if we search for DVD, it will look for certain results where we have DVD on its own. So something like this didn't work for us. So we may rather want to use text filters, but contains. So we want to look for a cell that contains the word DVD, not necessarily equals DVD, because we don't have any cells here that has the word DVD on its own. So we can go to this drop down, go to text filter, goes to contains. Let's try this again, DVD, and we push OK. There we go. We'll find all of the cells that have the word DVD inside. So it's a good idea to familiarize yourselves with these words over here, with these criteria that in the exam it may ask you to filter down to something very specific. There's a difference between equals and there's a difference between contains. Contains is an instance of a specific alphanumeric combination, or it can be a word, it can be a number within a cell, and what we would have it visible alongside other words, whereas equals, the entire cell needs to be on its own with that specific word, with that specific number. So we have equals, we have does not equal, we can even have begins with, ends with. We have also custom filter, but before I go to custom filter, just to let you know that we may have specific text filters based on different types of data. So if we have this column date here selected, we go to date filters, we will have different types of filtering mechanisms because it's a date column. So maybe you want to see specific performance between certain months or for a specific month. So we can choose something from here. So let us try something this month. It won't allow us to show that because we are looking at 27th of July 2020, whereas the data only stops at 2016. So let's try something else over here, all dates in this period. Maybe you want to see July. So it will then filter down to all the records in July for this particular period. So for a date column, you'll have different types of filtering mechanisms. For numbers, you'll have different types of filtering mechanisms, greater than, less than, between, top 10, above average, etc. So do familiarize yourself with what you have with the specific columns. Then it will, because then you may be asked in the exam to apply a specific filter, and you need to then just make sure you pick the correct wording. Okay, so number filters, maybe you want to see the top 10 set of results, but we actually have a number of filters going on here. So let us clear all of these filters here, and we maybe want to then look at the top 10 cells that we have over here. So we want to filter the top 10 items, push OK. We will see the top 10 items that have been filtered down for us. So that allows you to show specific performance from your or with your data. So I did say that we may want to rather use slices instead of filtering. So a slicer is a graphical filter. It allows us to really interact with the table object on another level and see filtering happen in real time. So if I go to insert slicer, I have the ability to show a specific type of field as a graphical object that I can physically use for filtering purposes. So maybe I will choose from here your product name. I'll choose manufacturer. And yeah, I think that's probably the best two I can use over here. So we have these objects that are created. They look exactly like shapes. So we would probably just place them next to each other in a certain way, and we can expand these if we like, just to cater for the text. We want to probably reduce the size so we don't take up too much space. And then how do you actually use these? Let's say I want to see everything that is from Contoso. So I would select the particular item from the list here, Contoso. When I click on Contoso, you will see that the table filters down instantly to the manufacturer Contoso. So it's an instant real-time filter. Why would you want to use this? So let me clear this again. I can go to the funnel icon with a cross, brings back my original data. Why do you want to use something like a slicer instead of ticking boxes? Well, really, if you go to this drop down, you have to unselect everything, then you have to reselect what you want to see, then you have to push OK, and then your data gets filtered down. Too many clicks to really see that, and we don't see the data being filtered in real time. We first of all have to push OK before we can actually see the results. So a slicer really allows you to instantly get your results that you'd like to see. So maybe you want to see everything under worldwide importers, right? And maybe you want to see everything to do with this 4 GB video recording pen. So you can put multiple filters in from multiple columns, and as you select the data, you can see in real time instantly the data that is being displayed here. So let's say you do select worldwide importers, you'll only see the data available for worldwide importers. You won't see anything else available because we don't have data for that. So it is grayed out for you. If you want to select multiple values inside a slicer, so you can, maybe you want to do a comparison between Adventure Works and Contoso. We select Adventure Works. We then hold down the control button. We select Contoso. We let go of our control button, and then we can see the values for Contoso, and then we can see the values for Adventure Works. Right, so there's certain cells inside there that have Adventure Works as well. And then again, we clear the filter. So a filter is a very dynamic way to get to get filtering inserted inside here. We do also have options under the slicer tab, contexture tab, to put in certain other functionality or to implement certain other functionality for the slicers. Let's say you want to give your caption or this particular slicer a different name. So we have over here manufacturer. Maybe for this particular slicer product name, I can call this particular slicer something else. I would click on the slicer itself, go to the slicer tab on the left hand side. In the slicer group, I have slicer caption. I can probably rename this to products, push enter. It gives it a different name. You may want to use the same color scheme, which is similar to this particular table. So I can choose this particular slicer, go to slicer styles. I can try and match up this particular theme to the left. I can also do the same with this particular slicer over here. If I go to slicer settings, it gives me additional options what you may want to do. Do you want to sort your items in a specific order? Do you want to display the heading? Do you want to give it a different name? So quite a lot of customization available when you choose slicer settings. If we have multiple slices inside our spreadsheet, we can choose how to arrange them, bringing it forward, sending it backwards, aligning them together. What I found very useful, which was probably my favorite setting inside Slicer tab, is the ability to change the number of columns. And this really works well for data that doesn't have a lot of values inside, and you want to have a different view of the slicer. Let's say you want to have these manufacturers going across in a row rather than multiple columns going across rather than multiple rows going down. If you increase the number of columns, you can achieve that effect. So I can click on the manufacturer slicer, go to the buttons group in the slicer tab. I can increase the columns. I can increase this to 3. And then you can see that I have now just one row with the data inside. And now I have a different view of the slicer. So maybe if I were to maybe insert another row here, just to make some space, then I can have a slicer sitting at the top over here, utilizing this extra space that I have here. And then I have a slicer here on the right hand side. And so I can make a really good dashboard here. I can make a really great looking report. People can instantly filter by WWI, worldwide importers, see something specific. It just makes it stand out quite well. In the exam, they may ask you to insert a slicer. They may ask you to change specific settings. Remember, you need to click in the slicer to see the slicer tab. Otherwise, it's not visible, just like your table object. So that's slicers. That is your sorting, filtering table object. There's one more setting that we can probably apply, which has got to do with filters. It's related to these two words here. I've got here unit price and quantity sold. I'm just going to delete this temporarily. And why I have inserted these two words, because I can set up what is called a custom filter. And that custom filter option was available inside the drop-down. We do have another way to do filtering with this data, and that is available under the Data tab. If you go to the Data tab, we have something here called Advanced Filters. So we want to maybe apply advanced filters on our data. We can do so. Click on this advanced command over here. And what this allows us to do, before I go into that, we can filter by using more than one criteria. So maybe I want to see all of the data from, let's say, Contoso with a price of something higher than a certain value. Or let's rather use the fields that we have here. I want to see items where prices are larger than, say, 1,000 rands and with a quantity of higher than 500. So it will very specifically find the data matching all the unit prices higher than 1,000 rands and all of the quantities sold higher than 500. It will take both criteria into account. So what you need to do to set this up first, you need to put your criteria inside specific cells. So then you can then tell Excel where to find the criteria. And I do suggest that you create additional space at the top. Don't try to do this on the right-hand side. You will find that these fields disappear and the view then looks confusing. You would create additional rows at the top. You would then put these labels here. The unit price you would specify, so shift in the full stop will give you a greater than, and I put in 1,000, right? And then quantity sold, shift in the full stop, 500. So the table must filter according to this specific criteria. So under my Data tab, I have my advanced command here. We'll have a dialog box appearing asking us a couple of things. What would you like to do with this this particular table object when we have filtered using this advanced filter mechanism? do you want to filter the list in place, or do you want to copy the results to another location? So this allows you to copy the results somewhere else, but we are going to filter in place. It's then asking us the list range. The list range means where does your table data exist? So the table data exists from A5 to G5 all the way down to G582. And when you do a selection of all your data, you will see that a defined name has been created, or that has been available all this time. So it says contoso cells with hashtag all in square brackets. So it means all the data in the contoso cells table object has been selected. Your criteria range is then asking you, where does your criteria exist? Your criteria exists from E1 to F2. So it's important we select the headings with our criteria, so then Excel knows to find that specific column header and then find the data with respect to the headers. And all we do from here is we push OK. So then you will see that your table has been filtered only to show values where unit price is larger than 1,000 and quantity sold is larger than 500. So both have to be met. When I use the word and, this criteria here, E2 and F2, both have to be met in order for this result to work out correctly. Okay, so that's really advanced filtering. It is quite on another level. You can actually set up many different types of filters here at the top. So you could say something for date, earlier or later than a certain date, for a specific product key or a range of product keys from a very specific manufacturer. For very specific product names, you just specify the heading, specify your criteria. So when you're specifying your criteria, you need to just make sure, I'll just make a note here, you use one of these symbols available to you. Right, so you have greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, less than, equal to, not equal to, or equal to. And that's a combination of your shift and your full stop with your equal symbol. And that will really determine the criteria that needs to be used. How do I know which symbol to use? That would depend on the question that gets provided to you. If you have a question that says, filter the values which are exceeding 1,000, the term exceeding refers to greater than, right? It does not include a certain value. You know, you may have a different opinion. The word exceeding may mean something different to you. Just be very careful that, you know, your opinion may not be something that is considered in the exam. It is something very tricky. You know, it's a very subjective topic because people understand words in different ways. Exceeding may be including data for some, it may excluding data for others. So, you know, when I'm teaching the course, or when I refer to the word exceeding, I'm not including an amount. I'm just seeing everything higher than a certain amount. If I do want to include a value, I may use something like greater than or equal to, or 1,000 and more. You know, so when you use words like that, you're including the value. Exceeding doesn't suggest that you're including a certain value here. So just be very careful that they may confuse you with the wording, and with the wording that you need to choose a specific symbol to get the correct results inside your table object. And then when you're done here, you can go to the table tab, the data tab, and the sort and filter group. We have the clear filter option, and that brings back our original data. Okay, so we still sticking here with a table. The last thing that you may need to do, right, is an exam question, or you may want to actually do this in practice, is let's say you want to go back to your original data. You want to remove the table functionality. You may want to be working with the original data. You can easily do that by going to the table design tab. You then go to the tools group. You have convert to range. So it's not an easy button where it says remove table functionality or delete table or go back to what you had before. Convert to range means going back to what you had before you actually created a table. So you select anywhere inside, convert to range. It will ask you with this box here, do you want to convert the table to a normal range? You would say yes. And what actually happens, your formatting stays, right? So it will keep your formatting for you. However, the table design contextual tab has disappeared. The filtering arrows have disappeared. The total row functionality is no longer available. We don't have the column headers frozen at the top for you to actually see. So it removes everything for you in one go. Keeps your data, keeps the formatting, but you can't really do any other reporting. If you do want to bring the table back, you can just select anywhere inside the data, Control T on your keyboard, or Insert Tab, Table Command. Make sure your My Table has headers boxes ticked. Make sure the correct data is selected, push OK, and then you have your table functionality available to you again. Okay, so that's everything to do with tables. It's quite a section. It's asked quite a bit. It is a very popular item in the world of Excel. A lot of reports, a lot of data analysis is based off Excel tables. So this is something you do want to probably use from time to time. Okay, so that concludes our entire section on tables. It was quite a big section, actually, if we were to look at our domain here. So we actually saw managed tables and table data. We pretty much covered everything inside this entire domain when we want to work with anything to do with tables over here. So we do still have some time. We will continue with the next domain over here. So I am going to be closing this. You're welcome to save it. It will be available in the YouTube video for you to watch over and over again, so you can practice. And I'm going to now open up a folder called Perform Operations by Using Formulas and Functions. And I'm going to be looking at a workbook called Company Forecasts. And we are now looking at the domain Perform Operations by Using Formulas and Functions. We are going to be inserting references. I'm going to talk about relative, absolute, and mixed references. I'm not going to be talking about reference named ranges and named tables and formulas because we already covered that. I covered the reference named ranges section in the previous video and the named tables and formulas in this particular video here. Okay, I did mention last week that I am going to change the order slightly because it's relevant that I talk about these particular objectives when I actually use them or when I actually introduce them. So over here, we're just looking at relative, absolute, and mixed references. So what do I have over here? We have a spreadsheet called All Product Sales Report. We want to calculate the following. We want to calculate total sales from the price excluding VAT, value added tax, or VAT, with the quantities sold. I also then want to calculate the price including this VAT, so 15% added to the excluding VAT amount. I also then want to see what will my prices look like if there's this projected percentage increase on the VAT, and I'm going to use the excluding VAT amount. So when we do these calculations, we will see that we need to ensure that we are referencing correctly. We are using relative referencing, we are using absolute referencing, and we are using mixed referencing correctly. If we use the incorrect form of referencing, we get the incorrect results. So what do these means of referencing actually talk about? So relative referencing, and absolute referencing, and mixed referencing. References or referencing, however you'd like to call it. So let's start off with the first one. The easiest is relative referencing. We always use this. This is something that's used on a regular basis. It is really the functionality in where we are doing a calculation between two columns or more than one column. And I want to then take the result and I want to copy the results all the way down. That action of copying the results all the way down refers to relative referencing. So the example here, let's say G4, I want to calculate total sales. I can say equals, I can select E4 multiplied by F4. I can push enter. I get the first set of results. Bottom right-hand corner, the green square is available for autofill. The thin black cross is there. I can double click when I see the thin black cross, and the data gets autofilled for me. So this action of the data being autofilled is referred to as relative referencing. What does it really mean? Let us go into our formulas tab. Let us go to formula auditing. Let's go to show formulas so we can really see what is actually happening here behind the scenes. So as we go down, we can see the relative cells are being used in the calculation as I go down. So as I go down to the next cell, I want to do the calculation of total sales, but relative to this cell, it will use E5 and F5. Relative to G6, it will use E6 and F6, etc. And then we can see this pattern being continued all the way down. So the act of going down your cells, repeating a pattern of some sort, is referred to as relative referencing. Okay, so that's just a technical term we need to be aware of. So that's how we would normally go ahead and do certain calculations. It starts getting a bit tricky now when we do something like price inclusive of that. So the calculation on how we need to do this, we need to add the 15% to the price excluding that amount. Now there's various ways in doing this. There's different ways to add percentage values to some data. I'm going to use a very simple method just so we can break it down so it's easy to see what we need to do over here, because it, I think, really depends on the environment you're in that will allow you to use a specific type of method. So in cell H4, I'm going to start off with equals. I'm going to open up my set of brackets. I'm going to say E4 times H2, which is the 15%. And then I'm going to add it back to E4. So we want to see a 15% increase on the cell E4. I can easily do this calculation by getting the multiplication done first, find out what the increase amount is going to be. So that will be E4 times H2. Then if I want to see the VAT inclusive of the price, I take that increased amount and add it back to the original amount, and I get my final value. And if I push enter, there's my price inclusive of VAT. And then let's follow what we would normally do. I double click bottom right hand corner, and we see we have multiple problems. And we have just a variety of problems here. Let us go and have a look at the formulas tab, show formulas, to see what the problem is. Remember, we looked at this tool in earlier videos. It's a great way to audit your cells to see what is actually happening inside a particular cell, to understand what is actually going on if you get an error here. So if we look at the first cell here, yes, it's correct. We're saying E4 times H2 plus E4 again, and I get my answer. Now, if we look at the next one, we can say see E5, which is correct, multiplied by what? Price inclusive of that, the text plus E5. Now, this is going to result in an error because now I'm breaking the syntax, I'm breaking the rule where I'm trying to add or trying to do a certain calculation with numbers and text, and that really results inside your cell with this value error. And as we go down, we will see that it's going to just increase the number of problems we have here. Certain values look incredibly large as well, and which is technically not correct. So I'm going to undo this, and this is where we look at absolute referencing. So absolute referencing refers to locking down a certain cell that needs to be used when I want to actually go through the action of relative referencing. So because when I use relative referencing, it didn't work out for me over here that every single cell going down here is used in the calculation that I need to do over here. So I need to lock down this 15% as I go down. So I still want to use the price excluding that amount, but I want every cell as I go down, H5, H6, H7, H8, etc., to make use of the 15%. And that's where the famous dollar signs come in. So when we see an example here, if I have $A, $1, the dollar sign in a cell reference means absolute referencing. Okay, so that's really the way it is. When you want to absolute reference something, we can put the dollar signs inside the cell reference. We put it before the column header, we put it before the row header. And so I need to adjust this particular function here, this formula, to apply the dollar sign on cell H2. To apply the dollar sign or apply absolute referencing on a certain cell reference, we need to push a certain button on our keyboard. So I'll just load the keyboard up over here. Now this will differ if you are using a laptop or a desktop computer. On a laptop, you have to find the F4 button. This is not letter F and number 4 together, but a button called F4 on its own, the function key 4. So function key F4. So on laptops, you may need to push the FN button, function button, to see or to make use of the F4 key. Certain laptops allow you to just push F4 on its own. So the F4 or the function keys are available in the top row of your keyboard. If you have a full-size keyboard, you will definitely see these function buttons right at the top from F1 to F12. So we need to push the F4 button to activate dollar signs. And I really suggest that you memorize F4. Unfortunately, there's no button available for F4. This is something you have to know really well in the exam. You could possibly put dollar signs manually. I do not recommend it because you may get confused with mixed references, which we are going to see in a moment. So after cell H2, I just push F4. I lock down, keep the cell constant, keep it fixed. You can use whatever term you like. And when I push enter, great, the first one is done for us. But when I get the rest done, you will then see correct results showing up. How do I know, again, if this is correct? Let's go to formulas. Let's go to show formulas. Let's go move across to the right-hand side. Let's look at this particular pattern. As we go down, we can see that the different cells in column E are being selected, which is correct, but you can see cell H2 has been locked down all the way down. So this is something you may need to do from time to time. Absolute referencing is a very popular option. Everybody or a lot of people that I know make use of it. This is one example. You may do something with percentage increase that we're going to see now in a moment with sales percentages. You may use this for an exchange rate calculation. There's just so many ways to actually apply absolute referencing. You want to keep one cell constant or one cell fixed or one cell locked down in a calculation as we go down. Okay, so now it gets tricky with mixed referencing. It's not a very commonly used way of referencing. very, very specific, and it's actually very hard to create. And it took some time for me to figure out how this is actually going to work. In the exam, it's very easy to actually see and try to make use of it. But when we have to create this, we have to think of the situation and actually how it's going to work. You'll find many videos across YouTube saying the same thing. It's very tricky to actually make something like this. But once it's set up, then it works really, really well. What I want to do is I want to see a percentage increase of 5%, 10%, and 15% on this price excluding that amount. But I want to do it for the one column and then click and drag across to do it for the rest. I really don't want to do a formula here, double click all the way down, a formula here, double click all the way down, the formula here, double click all the way down. And these are just 3 columns. What if I had 10 columns and I had to do this? I have to do 10 sets of formulas and it gets very tedious. I want to do it for the one and must complete it for the rest. So let's first of all do the calculation. All right, so we are going to say equals. We are going to do this calculation here where I am saying price exclusive of that. I'm going to then multiply it by this 5%. Right, sorry, and we then go plus, add it back to the original. We push enter. Right, let's try to complete it for the rest. Again, we have another problem showing up here, all these weird amounts showing up. So if we were to go look at this show formulas, again, we can see very clearly that it's not working as expected. I want this 5% to be locked down. All right, so let's actually put that in place. I'm going to undo this here. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to push F4 after I2. All right, let's go and double click. Great, that looks correct. Let's just go double check that. Yeah, working the way as expected. But now what I want to do is I want to click and drag these results, copy it over to the right hand side, hoping that instead of 5%, it uses 10%. All right, so I'm just going to select cell I4, Control Shift down to select all my data going across and going down, rather down, sorry. And then we can go to the thin black cross at the bottom right hand corner, click and drag across. We usually would click and drag down, but we're clicking and dragging across. Right, and we have certain values put in place. Right, so let's see now if this is working correctly. If I go to show formulas, right, I see there's a problem here. Now, a quantity sold is being used. I2 is still being used, right? And we have, again, quantity sold being used here. So this is now incorrect. The incorrect column is being used and the incorrect cell at the top is being used over here. So this is where mixed referencing comes into the picture. Right, so it is a bit tricky, just bear with me. What we want to do is, with this calculation, I want to ensure that when I click and drag across, that I allow the 5% to move to 10%. Right, so that must definitely happen. So the columns can actually, the column reference can move, but the row reference must remain locked down. It must not jump to 2021 and 2022 and 2023 afterwards. The percentages must remain locked down, but I can move across if I want to. I want to really restrict my movement going downwards. Same goes for column E. I want to make sure column E is locked down, but I don't want to restrict my movement going downwards over here. So that's where mixed references come in, where I can choose, with this example of A1 here, I can choose to lock down the column and allow the row to move, or I can allow the column to move and I can lock down the row. Okay, so this gets very confusing, and if you get the wrong one, if you insert the wrong one, then we have disastrous results. And then you can actually see, if I just bring this next to these here, there's just so many different combinations over here. So that's why it's important that you try not to insert these manually when trying to do a calculation. F4 will get you your $2 signs. If you push F4 multiple times, you can toggle between these two over here, where we have locking down the column, not the row, and locking down the row, not the column. So we're going to make some slight adjustments to our first formula here of I4. So I want to ensure that the column E is locked down, but the rows can move down very easily. So after E4, I'm going to push F4 once. I'm going to push F4 once more, and I'm going to push F4 one more time. Okay, so now we have column E locked down, but the rows can move as it is. I'm going to do the same thing for this E4 reference here at the end. Push F4 3 times. Then I want to ensure that the row remains locked down, but the columns can move. So with I2, I'm going to push F4, right? So what we have here then, that's what we'd like to use. The columns can move. I can change to J, J can change to K, but row 2 must remain as row 2. And we can push enter, right? It will do it for the first one. Right, and let's see the second one. So let's just have a look here, show formulas. Is it working as expected for the first column? Yes, it is. Right, then let us now select everything from I4, Control Shift down, all the way down, and let us click and drag across to see if the same effect has been achieved. So let us now look at show formulas for the next column. Yes, if I go down, I can see column E is still being used. I'm able to move my cells down, and I can see that now the 10% is being used. All right, definitely working as expected. Let's look at the next column. Yes, column E is being used, and cell K2 is being used. All right, so we can see that with a change in your referencing, if you change it to mixed references, you can achieve this effect very quickly, where I can do the calculation in one column. I can click and drag it to many columns as I like, bearing in mind that I have referenced my cells correctly. I've used the correct mixed references where I am locking down the column. So maybe I probably want to put this in words here. So then you just remember that locking down the column header. Let's use the term unlocking the row header, or locking down the row header, or unlocking the column header. In the exam, it is very tricky, actually. So I just will let you know that depending on the question that you have, and depending on how it's laid out, if you see something like this, a similar layout to mine, you may need to use mixed references. Okay, so you may want to take some time on this. I know the exam doesn't, there isn't a lot of time in the exam because you only have about 50 minutes, right? But you may want to practice this over and over again. You got the exercise files, you got this video to go through over and over again to explain what mixed references is all about, what absolute referencing is all about, and what relative referencing is all about. And with that, I end today's session. Thank you for joining. It is 10:30 my side, 1.5 hours later. We will continue, and actually we should be able to finish off our exam prep session next week in my final video. I may take a few minutes over just to maybe finish it off. It's not that I want to rush, but we just really don't have a lot left, right? So it's not necessary to cover everything in more than one lesson. We don't need to go into the following week. We should comfortably be able to finish next week, and then I will explain in the next video what are the next steps and what's going to be happening.